Alright, what's up everyone, Duquesne23 here, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of race throughout Halo. Now this won't be talking about the vehicles or anything like that. This is strictly just the game type, and also we won't be talking about maps. Those both will be extra videos that I will be doing another time. I'll be talking about vehicles, the evolutions of that, at least in conjunction with race, and also maps throughout the ages, throughout the years and everything. So but this one is strictly gonna be about the race game type. Now, as many of y'all know, I am a huge race fanatic in Halo. I love it to death. Now, I'm not as hardcore as some people over there in the Halo Tracks community. They are a lot more insane over there and stuff, but I am, of course, a race fanatic. I do love it. More of a casual race fanatic, not like what the people over at Halo Tracks with Jeff and all them over there. But I do absolutely love race. I have a blast with it. And so let's go ahead and start talking about where race came from. And the very first game, a lot of people may not know this, the very first game that race came from was actually Halo Combat Evolved. Halo Combat Evolved had a race game mode in it. So for people who say, oh, race is a newer thing, no. It was there since the beginning. It was in, Combat Evolved. You can load up Blood Gulch or, and stuff, and actually load in the game type race that they have in there and go race. Now, it is very basic. Of course, there is no forge in Combat Evolved, so you can't place your own checkpoints around. You can't do that type of stuff, but you can load it up, put whatever vehicle you want to race with, and you can go through all the checkpoints and, have a race with some friends. Now, the checkpoints are interesting to say the least. The checkpoints are kind of scattered throughout the entire map and things like that. So it's very interesting how they decided to have the checkpoint progression. It's not too smooth on, having a race. There's some points where you got to like all of a sudden just turn around and go the other way and then turn around and go the other way and stuff. So they didn't make it like smooth and things as you're racing through, but at least it was there. It was there at the beginning, and it is a blast to have. And I know a lot of people did not know that Halo Combat Evolved actually had race in it. Now, of course, the next iteration of race skipped over Halo 2 because it didn't have anything, and went on to Halo 3. Now, Halo 3 did not have an official race game type, but people were able to make it because Halo 3 had a forge, and race people are we're very resilient whenever it comes to race, because a lot of times race is put on the back burner on things and only comes out a year after launch, an official game mode. But Halo 3 didn't have an official game mode, but it did have a forge, so people were able to make racetracks with the mongooses and warthogs and things in the game, and they used other game types to kind of work in a race game type. Now this game type did not have what people made in Halo 3, did not have checkpoints throughout the system as you're going through. Like I said, they didn't have a race game type. So they had to work with, I've seen some using King of the Hill, using that as a final checkpoint on there, but I also know that they use VIP as a very VIP is basically what most people use for the race game type. And, you basically put a hill, the VIP thing at the end of the track, and you actually have to have grav lifts and teleporters to make sure people do not try to get out of the mongoose and jump back into the VIP to give yourself another lap, with quotes, another lap. And so you have to actually do that type of stuff, and it's just you race through everything in Halo 3, and you'll just cross through that barrier at the very end, going through those gravless and teleporters, and you'll just drive through it. So of course, if you jump out of your vehicle and try to go through that point with the teleporter, you will just get teleported to your death, or like somewhere else or wherever. But yeah, Halo 3 was interesting because there was not any kill boundaries like what they have currently now in Forge. What you had to do is you had to actually forge up in the sky in that one section, so that way if you do fall off the map, you will fall and you will blow up whenever you cross through that certain point. Now, the people who forged in other sections, you either had to have walls or something to block it off, or you can just have some way of getting back up onto the map if you do fall off, get back up onto the track itself if you fall off. So Race in Halo 3 was really interesting, but it didn't really get as prominent and everything until Reach. There was, some fairly popular maps and everything in Halo 3. It was still popular to be able to race on, but it didn't get its huge popularity until Halo Reach and Halo Reach's Forge and the inclusion of a race game type. So with the inclusion of a race game type in Halo 3, people were able to make maps with checkpoints, so that way if you do fall off of the map and die, you can respawn at the previous checkpoint and continue the race, and you don't have to restart at the very beginning of the track like in Halo 3. If you do die, you just have to respawn at the respawn point at the beginning of the track. So basically in Halo Reach, they incorporated things a lot better. So what you need to do in order to make a race game type in Halo 3, to make a race checkpoint in Halo 3, is you just spawn a hill down, you go into its, settings, and you change the spawn sequence to either 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever checkpoints it'll be. If it's the first checkpoint, you put it spawn sequence 1, second checkpoint, spawn sequence 2, and so on and so forth. And then you got to make sure you set it up as a race flag on there. And so basically that will tell the game that this is a checkpoint, and you go through and spawn. Now you don't have to worry about putting in respawn points at the checkpoints or anything like that. They automatically act as respawn points also. And Race was huge. Race was massive in Halo Reach. So many people were able to forge race maps, and there's so much variety. That's actually where my channel blew up originally, is whenever I started making racetracks in Halo Reach. And the very first one that really blew up was my Tokyo Drift map, and that's what got me somewhat popular online, is making race maps in Halo Reach. Now I still made other maps, but of course the more fun of it for me off of making maps was making Race. Now it was huge. Custom games and everything in Reach were huge. Race was huge. There was solo channels dedicated to just Race. ProForge Racing was a channel I was a part of for the longest time, and we were big back then. I think we had, 5,000 subscribers, but back then and during the Halo Reach era, that was huge on YouTube. If you had 5,000 subscribers, you were considered a pretty big channel. Then if you had 10,000 subscribers, then oh boy, and stuff. But I was a part of ProForge Racing. We did a lot of race maps, a lot of fun and everything like that. So there's channels dedicated to just Race, and there was a bunch of them. There wasn't just ProForge Racing. I know we had things like Aesthetic Forging I was a part of also. That channel. There was other channels that like Laid Back Gaming that strictly did race contest stuff and different race map features and everything. There was Obronco who did a race map feature. These are all the people off the top of my head. Some of my friends that they're no longer on YouTube, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy forgers that has sprouted up. Can't Stop Donut, Vionized, and all them that were just fantastic forgers that were able to make some crazy stuff in Halo Reach. And so it was just a lot of fun. Halo Reach's Forge, provided so much, for Race, and provided just a massive amount of fun for the community and everything. So then after Halo Reach, we came on to Halo 4. Now Halo 4 was something at launch for Forge. It kind of downgraded. It upgraded some things, in Forge, but then it also kind of downgraded some stuff. There was no precision forging. There wasn't a large forging area, like how Forge World was a large forging area. We didn't have a large forging area until we got the Forge Islands, later on. But yeah, so the forging was interesting, and then there was no race game type at launch. I think it came about a year or 8 months later, something like that. The race game type finally came in Halo 4 on there. So it's just one of those things where, again, race is just not a priority on there. After Reach, we're oh, got the race game type, all that types, kind of expected it for Halo 4. It was not there in Halo 4. Now, whenever the race game type did come in Halo 4, it was great. It was a typical race game type. You're able to just set all your options up and things like that on there, and the vehicles, the laps and things, and you just place out checkpoints. It's fairly typical. It's just a normal type of thing. Now, of course, there is a modded race game type in Halo 4, that does a lot more, that goes a lot crazier with stuff. And a lot of, I know, the more intense, like the people over at Halo Tracks, uses the modded race game type, which even now I think I use the modded race game type more and stuff. So it's just one of those things where it's, you know, if you're looking for all that type of stuff, I will leave a link, at least a gamer tag where you can download the modded race game type and everything, because I know that there is a massive list of custom games that you can download that someone has made on here. So if you do want to be able to do that, Don Cut has made a massive list of game types, and I will leave a link to that. Not just game types, but maps. I will leave a link to that in the description down below. So if you want to be able to, I mean, it's not just race, it's mini games and everything, and just tons of stuff. So if you want to check that out, link below. But you know, yeah, there's also the modded race game type that it's in there, and so it gives you a lot more options to be able to mess with settings and race and stuff. And so again, with Halo 4, once the official race game type came out, it was a lot better. You know, we got to, you know, do some pretty cool races, especially whenever they came out with the little Forge Islands you know, map that you could forge on. So it's a nice large area that you could forge on. But that one, yeah, it's you got to have tons of fun, you know, racing on different stuff. I know people was still, you know, made stuff on Impact and Erosion, and made race tracks on all those type of places. Ravine, less so. I know there are a few racetracks on Ravine, but it was a fairly small canvas, so less people made stuff on there. But the Halo 4, you know, race was a blast to be able to play on. And the Mongoose itself, which is, I know I said I wouldn't talk about too many vehicles, but I will say that the Mongoose in Halo 4 is considered one of the best Mongooses for racing. Even in, you know, Halo Reach was another great Mongoose for racing. So that's just, you know, the reason why I'm saying that is because whenever I get to the Halo 5 section, we need to talk about that. But, you know, it's basically, though, it's fantastic. It was a lot of fun to be able to race in Halo 4 whenever they finally got the race game type in there. And we were able to have some fun with that type of stuff. So now we move on to MCC, coming out in the chronological order. Is Halo 2 Anniversary. Halo 2 Anniversary race brought in is basically similar to Halo 4's, you know, including the Mongoose and everything. But, you know, Halo 2 Anniversaries, they did, I think they had a race game type. I'm trying to remember. I think they had a race game type at launch on there. If it wasn't at launch, it probably came like 8 months later. But basically, though, that race game type had problems. That race game type was actually made by Certain Affinity, and I remember even talking with Certain Affinity people, some of the developers there, on trying to fix some of the problems with the race game type. But basically, whenever you spawn whenever you're setting up your checkpoints in certain, you know, I said in Certain Affinity, in Halo 2 Anniversary's race game type, the problem is that it has an invisible barrier, and this was actually, this was actually the very first time you had to place out respawn points at your checkpoints. So Halo 2 Anniversary required you to place out respawn points at your checkpoints so you can respawn if you do die in between checkpoints. That's the first time that that's happened, where the checkpoint didn't also act as a respawn point. So the problem is, though, is that the checkpoint system that they had on there, it had this invisible, this is what I was told by Certain Affinity, it has like an invisible, like, barrier type of thing, that an invisible zone, I guess you would say, where, you know, if there's any respawn points within that zone of the checkpoint, it had a chance of you spawning on that respawn point. Now, the problem about that is that if you have two checkpoints somewhat near each other, like let's say you have a collision course track or just two sides of a racetrack that are somewhat close to each other, so their checkpoints are kind of close to each other, the respawn points from the other checkpoint may be activated whenever someone dies, you know, on the previous checkpoint. And so you may spawn at the wrong checkpoint. Now, the whole thing is that it's supposed to be weighted to where you're spawning, you know, the respawn points that are closer to the center of that zone are your main respawn points. But it's possible if there's other people already respawning there, you may spawn off on a different respawn point that's not at the checkpoint you're supposed to be going. I hope y'all understood what I was trying to say right there. So that was a big problem with the Halo 2 Anniversary checkpoint system. And it also did introduce the idea that you had to place respawn points down at your checkpoints, and the checkpoints don't actually act as a respawn point like what they previously did with Halo 4 and Halo Reach. But overall, racing in Halo 2 Anniversary was pretty fun. There was, some great maps that people have made. The Forge was different. You can actually introduce some scripting into Halo 2 Anniversary's Forge, so you can actually have some maps that you'll be playing with where they have scripting, at least some small little scripting setups there, where you can like maybe shoot something while you're driving if you're having a battle tracks type of thing or something, where it will trigger, a scripted object thing to happen. So it's pretty cool. And that's another thing that I know I didn't mention on previous stuff like Halo Reach and everything is battle tracks. Battle tracks is where you have another person in your vehicle. That person is shooting while one person is driving and you're trying to battle everyone else. But yeah, so that was another fun thing, that was with racing. And, Halo 2 Anniversary was, it was fun. It was a blast to be able to have with there. But it still had a little bit of issues. Nothing as clean as what Halo Reach's racing was. Halo Reach, it's super simple to set up the checkpoints. The Mongoose was great and the Warthogs were great in Halo Reach, and it just worked. Everything, it just worked. The community was great. It wasn't too complicated and everything. So even with the improved Forge in Halo 2 Anniversary, the problem is that setting up checkpoints was a little bit more complicated, since you had to add some respawn points, and you had to be careful about putting two checkpoints close to each other because it may mess up off of respawning with those respawn points. But now we will go ahead and move on to Halo 5's race. Now, Halo 5 is known as the greatest race period in all of Halo. No, I'm just playing around. But Halo 5's Forge is fantastic. Halo 5's Forge is better than any other Forge in anything, and I will argue with anyone who says Reach is better because the controls in Halo 5 are more difficult. It's like, no, stop. If my 8-year-old son can learn how to play Fortnite with its ridiculous controls, like where you have to learn how to build fast while getting shot, and you have to hit a bunch of different buttons to be able to build like a wall ramp, and then switch it to, some stuff to switch it to going to a door, so you have a hole to roll through, you have a ceiling going. If an 8-year-old can figure out how to play Fortnite with all those different button combinations, whenever they're and while they're getting shot, you can figure out how to actually use the controls in Halo 5's Forge. Okay, that's enough with my rant there. Because basically any game, you start off not knowing the controls and you just have to learn it, and pretty much any game that you don't know the controls, you learn them. You just take a little time to figure them out. Okay, enough with that rant. But all right, so Halo 5's race, the Forge is incredible. It's unmatched compared to anything previously in everything. But the problem was Halo 5 did not have race at the launch of the game. Halo 5, unfortunately, once again, like any other time, race came about 8 months to a year later. It may have been a year this time. A year after launch of Halo 5. I don't know. It may have only been 8 months. I don't know. Somewhere around there. It was a while after after launch. But basically, Halo 5's race mode came out much later, like usual, and it was okay, Halo 5's race mode. The problem was with the race mode is that it used a lot of scripting. It wasn't just something, even like Halo 2 Anniversary, where you could put out a checkpoint, just change some things, and that's it. Just change it to race, or, like a race flag or race checkpoint or whatever, and, in the settings, and that is it. In Halo 5, you have to spawn out a script brain system that had like 9 different script brains and a terminal, and those are just for the brains to make the race game type work. So you had to do that, and then you had to spawn out a checkpoint that was at the like a checkpoint system. So you can either have a single checkpoint, but normally they always have the main brain checkpoint and then 2 little side ones that give you like markers where the checkpoint is. So there's 3 little things that you spawn out for a checkpoint. And then you have to go into the settings of the checkpoint itself, go ahead and go change that to whichever checkpoint you want it to be. So it can be, checkpoint 1, 2, 3, whichever spawn sequence, it is. If it's checkpoint 1, then, put it to 1 and stuff. So you have to do that on there. And then And then you have to put out a checkpoint. Like after you put out all the other checkpoints, you have to spawn a different checkpoint from a prefab or something that will act as your last checkpoint because it has a different scripts in it. So it acts as your last checkpoint, and then you set that one up. Let's say, you know, you have this is your 10th checkpoint is the last one. So then you got to, of course, put the spawn sequence for 10 on that. But it has to be a different checkpoint that you will spawn in than the one that you'd use for any other checkpoint throughout your race. The last checkpoint is a special one that you have to spawn in that prefab that is completely different. Now, not only do you have to do that, is then you have to also put down the respawn points on there, you know, and you have to make sure the respawn points also have a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever, you know, spawn point that they work with. So if you're putting respawn points out for checkpoint number 1, you have to actually, you know, go into your respawn point settings and set that as, you know, as 1, as the like spawn sequence 1. So it'll be connected to the checkpoint number 1. And same thing, let's say you're on checkpoint number 5, you put down respawn points, change the respawn points to where the spawn sequence 5, so they match the checkpoint number 5 on there. So that's what you have to do with that. Now, you, of course, with anything, you have to go into or off of your very initial spawns. You place your initial spawns out, but you have to make sure you also have respawn points out. And this is with any game. You got to make sure you have your respawn points out on there just in case someone dies before the first checkpoint. That way they have a place to respawn on there. But yeah, so no, we're not done. We're not done with the race game type, okay? We're not done with the race game type in Halo 5. Now, let's say you have 10 checkpoints on your map on there. Now you have to go into that script brain tree and go over to the, not the far right brain, the far right brain. You have to go to the second to the far right brain. You have to go into there, into the options of that brain, scroll down and change its spawn sequence stuff on there, like the amount of, you know, I don't know what it says on there. I should have probably looked that up to know exactly what it says, but you'll see it here on screen. But basically you have to go over into there and you have to change that number to match how many checkpoints you have on your map. So this entire script brain tree of the race game type knows how many checkpoints you need to go through to be able to consider as a 1 lap on there. It's no longer how it was in Halo Reach or Halo 4 or anything like that, where in the game type settings you just put 3 laps and it just knows from it going from checkpoint number 10 to checkpoint number 1, you have gone through 1 lap. You can no longer do that in the game type. And so that basically means that anytime you're playing any race map in Halo 5, you have to actually go in and you have to change the game type settings, the actual game type settings, not in Forge, in the game type settings in the menu, and change how many, you know, points it is to win. So if you want to do 3 laps with 10 checkpoints, that means you're going to have to put in 30 points to win in the game type settings. And the next race map you may race has, I don't know, 15 checkpoints on it. And so then that means you're going to have to go into the game type settings before you start the map, before you start the custom game, and change that to 45 points to win if you want to do 3 laps. So it's kind of annoying, unlike how it was in the past with Halo Reach, Halo 4, and things like that, where you could just, in the game type settings, in the actual race game type settings in the main menu, you could just put 3 laps, 5 laps, you know, or something like that. Like, you know, it just automatically knows whenever it goes through a lap, because you enter in through the last checkpoint and their next checkpoint is checkpoint number 1. It automatically knows that. So this is something that's very irritating with Halo 5. But now we're not done. We are not done with Halo 5's Forge. Problem is with the race game type with Halo 5 is that there's sometimes checkpoints don't spawn for people. So if you have a map that has a lot of objects on it, or, you know, it's high budget or just things like that with light map, with physics or whatever on there, and then you have a lot of people play on that map, a lot of times checkpoints won't spawn for like 80% of the people on there. So only like, you have 10 people playing on there, only 2 people will have checkpoints. Everyone else won't have any checkpoints or anything. So they're just driving around the map randomly, not knowing where to necessarily go if it's not a super linear race map. And so that was a massive issue with Halo 5's Forge. Now, the good thing is, I think it's Sword of Malnock. He actually came up with a checkpoint fix, which I have in my file share if you want to know, like with all the checkpoints, with everything, the brains, all the script brains, the checkpoints, the checkpoint fix, the actual checkpoint itself, and the final checkpoint that you all need. Everything, all those items you need. You need the giant script brain tree, on there. You need a checkpoint fix where basically if you cross through this checkpoint fix at like right whenever you spawn on the map, you put the checkpoint fix down, you cross through it, it'll force spawn the checkpoints. So that means if people don't have checkpoints, they will all of a sudden see checkpoints now, and so it's good, it's fixed, and then people will go ahead and they can race around the map. And also another problem is if you do join in progress on maps, you don't actually see checkpoints. If you join in a map halfway through the map or even 10 seconds into the map, you will no longer see any checkpoints. You just don't. So this checkpoint fix also fixes that issue. If people are joining in, they will be able to actually see checkpoints whenever they cross through that little fix barrier on there. So yeah, there's a lot of things with Halo 5 that cause a lot of problems. So I'm hoping with Infinite, we get a checkpoint system at launch. And of course, one that works where you don't have all this ridiculous, crazy nature stuff that like you have to spawn in this massive script brain. Then you have to go into the checkpoints and change this. And then you have to spawn a last checkpoint. You can't just use in one of the normal checkpoints that you have. You got to spawn in a special last checkpoint and change that. Then you got to go into the script brains to be able to actually change how many checkpoints you have in there. Then you have to make sure you put down the checkpoint fix so people can actually have checkpoints if there's a lot of people playing on the map. Then you have to go into the custom game type settings to make sure you change, every single time the points to win to be able to do 3 laps. Yes, it's so insane, the Halo 5 way of doing it. So I hope they, make it more simplified. I love all the options of the scripting because you could change so many things with the checkpoints, the sounds as you go through the checkpoints in Halo 5. Like you could change that, the marker, the, locations, like the notifications of the next checkpoint. You could change all these symbols and what it says and everything like that. It's really cool what you can do with the checkpoint system in Halo 5. But the problem is it's so convoluted and so complex to actually just get it set up. There's a lot of times whenever I do a race, game type, like a race contest, I'll just be like, no, just don't worry about checkpoints, on there if you don't want to do it because it's so complicated. I know with the Forge Hub contest that I helped with a long time ago, they said the same thing. If you don't need to worry about doing a race game type, just because it's very convoluted and it's very difficult to be able to set up for just normal users. So this is just one thing that I hope with Infinite they come out that there will be simple. It'll just be something you could place on the map, like if you need to have a whole bunch of brains, but you just put the brains on the map and you just put the checkpoints on the map and that's it. You don't need to go into the brains. You don't need to do anything. Just go into the game type settings in the middle of the game of the race game type and just say, I want to switch this to 5 laps or 3 laps or something like that. It needs to be simple. Or there's some way on your actual map with scripting and everything to where you just use a race game type, but on the map, it actually knows how many, like you set up how many laps that you will have on this map or something, and it knows automatically on there. So people don't have to change any settings or things to be able to go into your map and race a certain amount of laps. So I don't know. I don't know what the fix is for Infinite. I hope it'll be good. I hope we'll get a race game type out on day 1. This was a fairly long video. Thank you everyone for coming out to this. I really appreciate it. I will be doing a deep dive into vehicles. And now all this type of stuff is my own personal opinion, especially with the vehicle things that's going to be coming out and, the race maps through the ages. And so this was tons of fun to be able to go through. Sorry if I rambled on a bit, especially about the Halo 5 Forge controls, because recently I saw a few of those things show up online, and I'm just like, people, if you can learn a new game, like you go into playing Cyberpunk or whatever, that's a fairly new game that, has stuff like, you go in to learn a new game or something, you learn their controls. You go into playing Fortnite or whatever, you learn their controls. And everything. You can go into Forge and learn their controls. I jump back between Halo Reach Forge, Halo 5's Forge, you know, I jumped into Halo 4's Forge recently, just check out all the new stuff and everything. Yes, it takes me a little bit to get used to all the previous Forges, or even jumping back into Halo 5, get used to that one again. But you just sit there and you just concentrate on trying to do it right. They have helpers on the left side of the screen in Halo 5 that tell you all the buttons that you need to do it. Like, and so it takes you like what, an hour to actually just learn the basics, you know, maybe not get super fluid with it, but just learn the basics of being able to grab objects, move objects, rotate objects, you know, spawn objects, duplicate objects, just things like that. You may not be super fluid, but man, Halo 5's Forge, once you get used to the controls, it's so fluid. Your work like can go so fast with how quickly and how like well the control setup is for it. But yeah, there's another rant, man. I need to make an entire video just over a rant over, you know, people not willing to give Halo 5's Forge a chance because they can't handle the controls. But yeah, so thank you everyone for coming out to this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. This was a ton of fun. Go ahead and leave a comment below on what y'all think of Halo Race. What do you want to see in Infinite with Race? You know, what type of game type, what maybe some special settings or just things like that that you want to be able to see in Race. I will be coming out eventually with actual, like, you know, the vehicles and everything, and you know, different race maps through the years and stuff like that I enjoyed. So thank you everyone for coming out, appreciate it, and I will see you on the next video. And remember, let's forge a new Halo.